The original Silent Hill stands as a great calling card game, one for Team Silent to prove their know-how and secure a destiny to go on to greater things. It's also a damn good game in its own right. Flawed, yes, but it's ultimately too interesting as a piece of gaming horror to be overlooked. The little things it does, especially for its era, are still impressive today, notably the much it does with so little. The fog that swallows Silent Hill was famously born from a technical limitation. It helps disguise the only small amount of space that could be rendered at any one time. Frankly, it was a genius turn because as the rest of the series goes, it's the fundamental image of the franchise. Here it's so distinct, however, as it's technically hiding the environment, but it becomes literally impenetrable and the most dense rendition of the fog in the series. But it takes on a different feel in the original. It's colder and gives a heavier sense to the town truly being a separate entity, disconnected from or not even on the earth. It's quite fascinating that Silent Hill achieves its feeling of isolation and otherworldliness even better with age. Playing it now, there's not a game that really looks like it. Even within its own series that came to future generations, the details omitted due to the PS1's limitations only add to its distinct candour. The blocky angular character models give a far greater impression of deformity than any highly detailed photorealistic model could. It's a testament to how experimental visuals could be a gateway to refresh what we've come to expect from horror games, given the ever-present push towards more pixels, more polygons. It's a genuine breath of fresh air to step into Silent Hill because it feels so different from what one is used to. There's just something, to me at least, that makes this kind of style unaging. It also allows the hokey voice acting to slip past mediocrity into genuine charm, with characters often standing oddly close to each other, talking face to face with no body animation whatsoever. The dialogue scenes are animated as wooden as the voice acting is, yet that's what makes it so likeable. It's less clear to me that this was an intentional choice, like many point out Silent Hill 2's bizarre performances to be. Yet I couldn't see it mattering either way when it's ultimately this easy to lap up.
Don't you see? She's right there.
That's absurd.
It's a shame that what is said by most characters pertains to a story that doesn't really come together in any way. Most will be familiar with Silent Hill being the game that explains why the town is how it is, yet at the same time it's so roughly alluded to that none of it actually congeals into something satisfying. Not only was it a misstep to try and explain what was going on, but what's here is poorly done. Dahlia Gillespie crops up whenever the plot feels like it needs to point Harry in any particular direction, and it feels kinda trite and unconvincing. Also, the eventual concepts the game lands with are without a doubt eye-rolling to a certain extent. Elder gods, sacrifices, experimenting on a young girl, to then an arbitrary side swing that alludes to the town's drug trafficking history. None of it really fits. They're too neat and peddled as story items, like they were from a soap opera that went on within Silent Hill before Harry even arrived. They come at the cost of being too juxtaposed against the ethereal and dreamlike vision for the rest of the game, leaving the story as probably the weakest part of the experience. It hints at an inconsistency to how Silent Hill wants you to perceive its universe, either quite literally or through the veil of the unexplainable, and the original seems unsure of which it would really like to be. The sequel is a much more confident game in how it relishes the chance to be different, to be vague, to let an image or sound sit without feeling the need to clarify. Also in how emotionally diverse it is. Yet I don't think Silent Hill 2 could have gotten there without the mistakes made here. In its struggle to try and define itself, the original game is sat in a middle ground, an impasse neither fully committed to explanation nor abstract enough to create a satiating platform for introspection. It's not something to be damned, however, it's mere growing pains, a studio finding its footing and toying with its lines having only just established them. The formula for how the game plays was pretty solidly conceived though. Combat, puzzles and exploration are the main tenets, same with most survival horror games at the time and since. Silent Hill has its setting to its advantage however, because the town and its buildings have no rules and are subject to the forces amongst the fog that shape them. Caverns are inexplicably carved out of the face of the earth, interrupting traditional routes. The fog suffocates your view, the darkness of corridors hides monsters that trigger the warnings of your radio. Then there's the other world, where things change from dream to nightmare. The genius of this is that it's a completely diegetic excuse for an ever-changing logic. On its own, Silent Hill and the levels are strange, but you really can't trust or be sure of anything in the other world. It's like the game throws you into a blender with its crashing industrial noise and oppressive rusting cage-like aesthetic that makes you really feel trapped in the abyss. They're the most pronounced parts of the game and really allow the team to play with the expectations of logic and behaviour, crafting some real good horror gags that are novel even today. It creates a feeling of distrust with the environment. It often feels like Silent Hill is peering past Harry into you as the player and what you think goes, then turning those expectations sideways. The way the hospital transitions into the decay is really well paced and handled, as is the combination of environments in the nowhere section at the end. For as rudimentary as the game may seem in its PS1 era coat of paint, playing it now even subverts the expectations of what a game can do to get under your skin. I can't imagine how it was for those at the time. It's not a totally clean experience, however. In fact, the largest issue with the game is its pacing. It's only about 5 or 6 hours long, yet it tends to drag in between its more interesting sections to have you run through an otherworld version of the town, only to then backtrack you to a location you've already just explored. Then there's the sewer levels. Padding if I've ever felt so. These elongate the main path, quite literally just acting as some tunnels, and are really big potholes in the road towards the climax, as are detours to the lighthouse and amusement park. There's something about the game's second half, mainly the third act, that just seems a little hobbled together, disjointed as to just arbitrarily fill out a checklist of 1 or 2 more environments for content's sake, especially combined with the lack of real narrative motivation. Harry Mason doesn't seem to forget about Cheryl, but after the 4th or 5th environment of you doing something completely unrelated to you finding her, the player just might. Honestly, it's hard to guess what the game was going for with its story because it never feels like it takes focus, and since the pacing fizzles out by the last third, it really seems like Silent Hill never has much of a focus on what it wants to actually achieve outside of its more contained instances. The loop of the game is the one standard that was to persist in the series, and luckily it's good. While it might take an adjustment to the pace of the encounters and controls, Silent Hill actually manages to have a gratifying little gameplay loop for itself. It feels good too, perhaps the beefy sound design and distinct animations carried the weight, but clubbing stuff on the head with a hammer is actually quite satisfying, as is clipping down beasts with a gun. A little stiff, yes, but nothing you can't get used to as long as you sit at the table on the game's terms. The puzzles are a little too obtuse for my liking, however. They were more tedious than satisfying to solve, and honestly I'd rather just consult a wiki guide for some of the vaguer riddles here. The combining item stuff is perfectly fine, but those of the written word are far too obtuse to really be satisfying in the sense of cracking a logical problem. I think I straight up wouldn't have guessed the solutions for most of these without guidance. Definitely seems like a more archaic staple of the genre at the time, and I think maybe the only element that has aged in otherwise a game that has, as mentioned, grown with some grace. There's nothing out there quite like it, and still the art design is commendable for creating such bold visual iconography and using technological limitations to its advantage. The creative use of the camera is also a notable element you don't see nailed quite as well as you do in the Silent Hill series. It always feels like there's something within the air or in between the walls looking at you, observing you, perhaps the town itself, who knows. But it's a dead giveaway that the game is a lot scarier and more effective in its incidental moments than in its bigger picture narrative. Although I'm torn on a few things here, I think we can all agree that our guy Akira Yamaoka turned over a banger of a soundtrack and did a great job at designing sounds in precise places to really convey everything you need to know without the spoon-feeding habits horror audio design sometimes falls into. There's a balance, as with all his works, between the downtime and heart-pounding, the off-kilter and the rhythmic, what's expected and what's not, and just the inspired DIY effects all around. Not to mention how he can also just throw the odd trip-hop spice so casually in there and act like he didn't just drop your favourite new tune on your lap to end the game with. He gets more room to flourish later in the series, but here, much like the game itself, was a calling card work and a low-key new standard for genre work as a whole. Many adore the original Silent Hill for many reasons. While I'm not red hot on the issue, there's no doubt in my mind in how I can see the appreciation for this game as more than justified. While I'm not convinced it's the most tightly designed game, it still to this day can be seen as an effective example of interactive horror. And seeing how hard it is for even current games to hit out in this space, the fact that Silent Hill holds up is a testament to it being a landmark title. Not only the bedrock for a great and unique series, but a nice little game in its own right. Still sharp, with claws ready to dig in and scare you.